Trump pauses Mexico tariffs for 1 month after border security pledge. EU leaders warn potential US tariffs could spark damaging trade war benefiting China. And Turkey's annual inflation drops to 42.1% in January, the lowest since June 2023. Hello, good evening and welcome to the Qnews Economic Bulletin, where we bring you the latest developments shaping the global economy. From key market trends and financial updates to regional economic highlights and forecasts, we provide essential news and analysis to keep you informed. And let's start with the United States, shall we? Billionaire Elon Musk, appointed by President Trump to lead a cost-cutting panel, announced efforts to shut down US aid, calling the agency beyond repair. Musk estimates that the Trump administration can cut $1 trillion from the deficit, citing concerns over fraud. Meanwhile, US aid staff have been told to work remotely as the agency undergoes restructuring. Critics, including Democrat Peter Welch, raises concerns over Musk's control over sensitive government data, adding to tensions surrounding the administration's efforts to reduce government spending.
And I just want to say thank you for making it happen. Thank you.
Now to tariffs, and US President Donald Trump has signaled that the European Union could soon face tariffs after imposing new trade levies on Canada, Mexico and China. Trump accused the EU of unfair trade practices, citing car and agricultural imports, and warned that tariffs could come pretty soon. The EU vowed to respond firmly, while stocks in major European car makers fell up to 6% amid concerns over potential US duties.
See what happens. It'll happen, but we'll see how things work out. It might happen with them, but it will definitely happen with the European Union. I can tell you that, because they've really taken advantage of us. And you know, we have over a $300 billion deficit. They don't take our cars, they don't take our farm products, they take almost nothing, and we take everything from them. Millions of cars, tremendous amounts of food and farm products. So the UK is way out of line, and we'll see the UK, but European Union is really out of line. UK is out of line, but I'm sure that one, I think that one can be worked out. But the European Union it's an atrocity, what they've done.
President Trump. European leaders have met today to discuss defense funding, with US President Trump's new tariffs looming over the discussions. The tariffs targeting Mexico, Canada and China begin tomorrow, while European goods are not affected for now. Trump has warned that the EU could be next due to a $300 billion trade deficit. The EU is preparing for potential tariffs and has vowed to respond firmly. Officials are considering boosting energy purchases to ease trade tensions, but recognize that a confrontation with the US is likely. European leaders, including EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas, have cautioned that US President Trump's potential tariffs on the EU could lead to a damaging trade war, benefiting China and harming both sides' consumers. Trump's assertion that the tariffs would target the EU following his measures on Mexico, Canada and China have sparked concerns, with Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, urging unity among Western allies. Critics, including Germany's Friedrich Merz and French Central Bank Governor Francois Villeroy-Dirgauhoux, warned that tariffs could backfire, especially in the automotive sector. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has stated that the European Union is strong enough to react to any tariffs imposed by the United States, but emphasized that the priority should be cooperation between trade partners. Speaking ahead of an informal EU leaders summit in Brussels, Scholz underscored that while the bloc can shape its own economic future, the goal remains dialogue over confrontation. Scholz also highlighted the importance of strengthening security and defense, both through NATO and by developing Europe's defense industry.
And this is also true for all these people that have no relationship to the past in Germany.
French President Emmanuel Macron has warned that if Europe's commercial interests are attacked, the continent must assert itself and demand respect. Macron stated that the recent US trade actions are pushing Europe to be stronger and more united. His remarks come as EU leaders brace for potential tariffs from President Trump following his sweeping trade measures against Canada and China. Spanish Economy Minister Carlos Huepo has emphasized the need for European Union unity in responding to US President Trump's tariff threats. Huepo urged the EU to protect its companies while ensuring they can compete on equal terms in a globalized market. Trump's recent tariff orders on Canada and China have raised concerns, and the European Union remains very wary of potential US tariffs, despite no clear timeline from the White House. And Luxembourg Prime Minister Luc Frieden calls tariffs bad for trade and advocated for reciprocal measures in response to US tariffs.
But I think tariffs are always bad. Tariffs are bad for trade. Tariffs are bad for the United States. They are bad for those who see tariffs imposed. But the answer to tariffs is to reply with same actions. But that is not the topic for today.
The Prime Minister of Luxembourg there. And Belgium's newly appointed Prime Minister, Bart de Wever, has pledged to increase defence spending, aiming to raise military funding to 2% of the gross domestic product. Speaking at his first EU Leaders Summit in Brussels, de Wever stressed that Europe cannot defend itself alone and must maintain strong ties with NATO and the United States. Meanwhile, EU leaders are bracing for potential tariffs from Donald Trump, imposed sweeping trade measures on Canada and China. Irish Prime Minister Michael Martin warned that protectionism would hurt citizens globally, calling for a constructive EU-US trade relationship.
Avec les États-Unis, je sais que la situation est compliquée et avec le nouveau président.
President Trump acknowledged that tariffs on Mexico, Canada and China may cause short-term pain, but insisted they are necessary to curb immigration and protect U.S. industries. Speaking as he returned to Washington, Trump dismissed hopes for a policy reversal, despite planned talks with Canadian and Mexican leaders. Analysts warn the move could shake global markets and fuel inflation. US President Donald Trump has now agreed to pause new tariffs on Mexico for 1 month after Mexico pledged to deploy 10,000 National Guard troops at its northern border to combat the flow of illegal drugs. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum revealed that both nations would begin working on 2 key areas, security and commerce. She added that Mexico would also take action to prevent the trafficking of high-powered weapons from the United States into Mexico. Following the announcement of the agreement, the Mexican peso, which had been down over 1% against the US dollar, reversed its course and strengthened into positive territory. Prior to the United States and Mexico's announcement to put the tariffs on hold for a month, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and the Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum have discussed countermeasures after the US imposed the new tariffs. Canada will impose 25% tariffs on 30 billion Canadian dollars worth of goods starting on Tuesday, with more to follow. Mexico has also ordered measures to protect its economy. So, Donald Trump's tariff policies have sparked global reactions, disrupting trade and highlighting the complexities of international economic relations.
A 25% U.S. tariff on imports from Canada and Mexico and a 10% tariff on Chinese goods are set to take effect on February 4th, with Washington citing national security concerns related to illegal immigration and drug trafficking. The move has sparked international backlash and fears of a global trade war. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau confirmed retaliatory tariffs of 25% on $30 billion worth of U.S. imports, with additional measures to follow. Mexico is also preparing its response, with Economy Minister Marcelo Ebrard calling the tariffs a strategic mistake that will hurt American consumers and businesses. Mexico's Plan B includes both tariff and non-tariff measures to mitigate the impact. Meanwhile, China has strongly condemned the tariffs, accusing the U.S. of violating WTO regulations. Beijing has vowed to challenge the measures at the World Trade Organization and take countermeasures to protect its economy. Global markets are reacting sharply. The S&P 500 and European stocks fell more than 1% while oil prices jumped. Now, EU leaders are bracing for potential tariffs on European goods. Despite growing backlash, President Donald Trump has defended the move, insisting it is necessary to protect American interests, but economists warn it could slow global growth and fuel inflation.
Well, joining us now from Abu Dhabi is economic analyst Dr. Ahmed Aboud, who's going to be discussing these latest tariffs. Thank you very much for joining us here on Q News, Mr. Aboud, Dr. Aboud, rather. Trump and Mexico have announced this postponement of the tariffs on Mexico. What do you make of that?
I mean, this is Trump is thinking from the economic point of view in a short term. And he thinks that, by imposing this, he was able to, raise more money for the USA economy in the short term. And this basically would be the fact, by adding this, traffics on the goods and services, this will increase the amount that will come to the USA at the end of the year. But as long as it's not clear what will be the consequences of this. Obviously, Trump is using the economic angle to put pressure on this country maybe for political reasons. Maybe he would like to negotiate on other before he leaves this, traffic. The same thing has been said for the Europe as well. We would see bad impacts on the global economy, especially for countries that is really exporting a lot, with increases in the price and again higher inflation.
Okay, and Dr. Aboud, of course we have these tariffs being slapped onto Canada and China starting from tomorrow. What will be the impact of those tariffs, not only on Canada and on China, but what would be the impact on the United States?
I mean, obviously, if you think from the internal point of view, I mean, if you look at the numbers, this should be somehow improve the internal production and motivate the internal economy by pushing the products of all this coming from internal sources, and then will be put pressure on the exported goods as well. So you will see some increase in the prices of some of the goods in the USA, especially the ones that are imported from outside the USA, but it will give a competitive advantage for the local products as well. And that, I think, Trump, he would like to somehow for the USA economy and the USA businesses to have competitive advantage by putting pressure and traffics on the USA or the exported goods from outside, the goods that will come from outside the USA, which could be good for the USA economy in short term. However, if you consider global trade, the supply chain, it's not only final product. When you impose this traffic, we impose it also on the raw material that come from outside the USA and used in the USA for production as well. So, lead to decrease in the production level in the USA. We'll see in the coming months the direct impact of this. It may be lead to increase the price.
Trump, as he just before he got a flight, and he was saying there on warning that the EU will be next. How realistic is the threat? Do you think it sounds pretty? It sounds pretty sure of it. And also, how frightened are the EU that this could start some kind of trade war?
I mean, obviously, this announcement come really like a big headache for that is struggling at the moment financially with high level of inflation, low productivity, issues in the labor market, and the EU already suffering a lot economically and financially these days. And with this, with this issue coming as well from the USA, we have seen, the EU leaders start, talking about it, discussing it in an informal way. But I think they are more into negotiation and talks about it with the Trump and the USA leadership about it to come up to agreement. And I think what caused this announcement is that the deficit that in the trade between the USA and Europe. Because basically it seems that, from the numbers we can see, the USA, imported goods more from the EU, and it seems that the EU is focusing on other countries as well to import goods, and this caused some, issues for Trump. He said, they should have, bought from us and use our products as well. We should bought more cars from our side. And the deficit we have in the trade between the EU and the USA is causing this issue. I think if they have a good conversation, if they have good negotiation and talk, this could be sorted easily between Europe and EU and Trump, especially that EU don't ready to clash with USA. They think that this is the only, it's a big ally. This is the one that is really, we are always together. And I think they will try to negotiate and, bring it to the table and have some discussion about it, maybe by increasing the number of, goods they import from the USA, maybe by adding a little bit of, increase the prices. But I think we'll come up to agreement on this issue.
Now, President Trump has defended tariffs, and he once said that the most beautiful word in the English language is tariffs, and he says that they're necessary for protecting America's interests. Some economists have accused Donald Trump of not really understanding how tariffs work. What do you think? Do you think he knows what he's doing, and could this harm the U.S. economy in the long term?
Obviously, clearly, what Trump is trying to do is against what we try to achieve in the recent years. What have achieved in the recent years was, free trade, global trade, ease of move of goods and services between countries. We have been, mourning for this for many years, and this has been appearing. You can see now, goods coming from China to USA, from anywhere that you can easily now, find anything anywhere, basically, right? And this was the current state of the economy. And, when we have a little issue with the supply chain after COVID-19, you can see how this will affecting everyone with the supply chain issues. And the traffic would do the same thing. It will put more restriction on the trade, on the movement of goods and service. It will reduce the competitiveness between countries, and it will put some countries in advantage for particular products, and this will cause some issue with with the trade and with the economic growth as well with the inflation. And I agree with them basically.
Okay. I'm gonna have to just jump in. I do apologise. We're just almost out of time, but we did get your points there. Dr. Ahmed Aboud joining us from Abu Dhabi. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much. Now let's get the latest economic news from the rest of the world. Eurostat has reported that Eurozone inflation climbed to 2.5% in January, exceeding forecasts and adding to economic uncertainty as fears of US tariffs pressured investor sentiment. Core inflation held steady at 2.7%, defying expectations of a decline, while energy prices surged to 1.8% after near zero growth in December. Croatia posted the highest inflation rate at 5%, while Ireland recorded the lowest at 1.5%. Despite the inflationary uptick, concerns over trade tensions with the United States are weighing on the euro, overshadowing expectations of a hawkish ECB response. Turkey's annual inflation rate dropped to 42.1% in January, marking its lowest level since June 2023 and continuing an 8-month decline. However, monthly inflation surged 5%, its highest rise in a year, driven by a minimum wage hike. Falling food, housing and electricity prices contributed to the annual slowdown, with core inflation also easing to 42.7%, a 2-year low. However, consumer confidence dipped slightly amid concerns over future financial conditions. Pakistan has signed an agreement with the Saudi Fund for Development to defer a $1.2 billion oil payment by 1 year. This move will help alleviate immediate fiscal pressures and strengthen Pakistan's foreign reserves ahead of an International Monetary Fund bailout review. The deal also includes $41 million for a water supply project benefiting 150,000 people in northwest Pakistan. Oil prices rose on Monday after US President Donald Trump imposed tariffs on Canada and China, raising fears of supply disruption, though gains were capped by concern over what could be an economically damaging trade war. Brent crude futures rose 1.7% to $76.95 a barrel after touching a high of $77.34. US West Texas Intermediate were up 2.6% at $74.42 after touching the highest since January 24 at $75.18. And gold prices erased early losses on Monday to remain close to record highs on safe haven demand, driven by growth and inflation concerns sparked by Trump's tariffs. Having initially slid more than 1% on a surging US dollar, spot gold recovered to be down 0.1% at $2,799.09 an ounce, while US gold futures lost 0.1% to $2,832, still trading at a premium spot rates. In the markets, world shares flagged in red during Monday's trading. The future for the S&P 500 fell 1.58%, and that for the Dow Jones Industrial declined 1.23%. In Europe, France's CAC 40 dipped 1.47%, Germany's DAX decreased 1.65%, and Britain's FTSE 100 dropped 1.36%. In Asia, Hong Kong's Hang Seng inched down 0.04%. Shanghai Composite inclined 0.06%, and in Tokyo, the Nikkei 225 index lessened 2.66%. Australia's S&P SAX 200 shrank 1.79%. . Cryptocurrency prices slid on Monday, with Bitcoin at a 3-week low as the risk of a trade war spooked investors and caused a sell-off across financial markets. Bitcoin, the world's biggest cryptocurrency, hit a 3-week low of $91.441.89 overnight and stood at $95,730.35, down 6.2% on the day. Smaller cryptocurrency Ether has lost nearly 25% in value since Friday, marking its biggest 3-day loss since November 2022. It last fetched $2,592.14. Let's recap our economic headlines. Trump pauses Mexico tariffs for 1 month after border security pledge. EU leaders warn potential US tariffs could spark damaging trade war benefiting China. And Turkey's annual inflation drops to 42.1% in January, the lowest since June 2020. And that's all for our Economic Bulletin. Don't forget to follow us on social media. Thanks very much for watching. Stay tuned for more here on Q News. Good night.